Join the conversation at 1-800-765-8255. This is the Talk of the Town.
Second half of the show is pretty much all yours. So text me, 304-TALK-304. You can call 800-765-TALK, 800-765-8255. Please welcome into the show friend of the show, political science professor Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University. Robert, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. This is one of my favorite days of the year.
It's the Super Bowl for news nerds and political nerds today, and I
Absolutely.
am one of those. So,
likewise with me, Dave.
All right, what are you expecting? Let's start big picture. Presidential race. Robert, will we have a winner by the time we get up tomorrow morning?
Well, my gut instinct is no. I definitely think it took the Associated Press about 4 days in 2020 to call the election for Joe Biden. I'm a little optimistic we'll have results quicker than that because we had so many mail-in ballots in 2020 due to the pandemic. So I think they'll get the votes counted a little quicker. But depending on how some of these 7 key swing states turn out, if it's a neck-and-neck race, I could easily see it being Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, or Friday before we get a final result. With that being said, if in those 7 swing states it turns out that the polls, which have been showing it's neck and neck right now, if it turns out that one side or the other does get a blowout in 3 or 4 of those key states, and that becomes apparent this evening, we might have a result, but my gut instinct is probably not.
Let me ask you this, Robert. What is the best case scenario, and what's the flip side? What's the worst case scenario over the next, say, 24 hours?
Worst case scenario is you see rioting in the streets. I don't think that will happen, but I do think that worst case scenario is you do see almost immediately both sides claiming victory or making widespread allegations of voter fraud, or that there's major counting errors in regard to the votes. That would be a worst-case scenario because it would breed a lot of uncertainty about the validity of this election. Best-case scenario is one candidate or the other has a clear mandate. They win both the popular vote and the electoral college by a pretty wide margin, at least 2 or 3%, so that you have some pretty healthy wiggle room. I think reality is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. You're going to see one side or the other win the popular vote by 1 or 2 points, and some of those states it's going to take a little longer to figure out which person won them.
Yeah, we're talking to Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor, and you look at the polling data that is available, Robert, and it's within margin of error. Either one of the candidates could have a blowout win. If it swings one way, margin of error, the other way, it goes to the other candidate. Or, like you said, it could be, 270 to 268 in the Electoral College. So if anybody says they've got it all figured out today, well, they're full of you-know-what.
Absolutely. There are a couple things that are worth mentioning about that. Nate Silver, who used to work for the New York Times, has released a newsletter a couple of days ago on his email list, a subscriber list that was talking about this issue. And he said that a lot of the polls right now are showing both candidates are within that margin of error. Any poll that's more than plus or minus 3% isn't really worth anything, but they're showing either Trump is at 47% and Kamala Harris is at 46%. They're both at 47%, or Harris is leading 47 to Trump's 46. With any of those three, that's still well within the margin of error and could significantly drop. I mean, that could theoretically be a 6-point spread. And when you look at that type of polling margin, we really just do not know. Now, there have been a couple of late-breaking polls. One woman out of Iowa, the Iowa Des Moines Register, published a poll from a woman named Selzer that was showing that women and late deciding voters are breaking in a pretty heavy margin for Kamala Harris, and also that she was leading in Iowa by 3 points. I think that poll was an aberration, but I do think that she deserves some credit for publishing an outlying poll, one that isn't matching the others, showing that they're both at 47%, because I suspect a lot of these news agencies are actually hurting their polls. If they get one with a poll that shows one candidate or the other is leading by a large margin, they don't want to have egg on their face if they're wrong on election night, so they're suppressing those results. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I do think the news media, to be blunt, has an interest in saying, well, it's a coin toss at this point. That way they don't look like they completely screwed it up if they call it for one candidate or the other.
Robert Bolton is visiting with us this morning on loan from Fairmont State University, political science professor. What are you looking for statewide tonight? Because it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of drama associated with these statewide races, whether it's governor, U.S. Senate, House of Representatives. Not a lot of drama here.
No, it's going to be a Republican wave across the board for any statewide race. I expect that Jim Justice will win his U.S. Senate seat. It's just a question of by how much. I'm going to make a prediction. Probably he'll get at least probably 57, 58% of the vote. I would not be surprised if he broke upwards of 60%. Donald Trump will obviously win the state. If he doesn't get it by at least 60%, I'll eat my shoe. And then for the other statewide races, Patrick Morrissey's likely going to win for governor. You're going to see for Secretary of State Chris Wilson. I expect that Mark Hunt will win for West Virginia auditor. You may see some shifts in one or two of the House of Delegates or state Senate races, but I don't think that's especially likely. I vote in Taylor County, and quite frankly, in a lot of those races, you didn't even have the seats contested. For my state Senate district, it was a Republican versus a Mountain Party candidate. The Democrats did not even bother to file anyone in this election.
Robert, let me ask you this question about when it comes to the Senate race and Jim Justice in particular. Justice has had his share of controversies during his 2 terms as governor. He's had to deal with a couple of teacher strikes. Certainly his business dealings have come under scrutiny. Through it all, his approval ratings have remained high. And Glenn Elliott, the former mayor of Wheeling, hasn't really been able to get a lot of traction, at least from the data that we have available. Now, he may surprise us tonight, who knows. But why do you suppose Jim Justice, despite all of the things that would seem to would have dinged a candidate in years past, has been seems like he's been unfazed by these controversies or criticisms that have come up?
I think it's part of a broader shift you see in American politics, where we are much more polarized today than we were even 10 or 15 and certainly 30 years ago. Now, ultimately, people are very tribal in their affiliations, and I think there's a certain attitude of, well, he's a Republican, I'm a Republican, so he must be all right by me. Also, Jim Justice has portrayed for himself this folksy, good old boy demeanor that is very endearing to many people. And then, to be honest, there's also just the consideration of when you look at in the news media discussion, for example, about the Greenbrier, where they talk about these tax liens and creditors who are attempting to foreclose on his properties, or even, for example, the recent Capitol murals dispute about Baby Dog being included in the mural. Those are usually things that, for the average layman voter who's more concerned about putting food on the table and paying their own bills, those are things that just do not really strike their attention. They're just not things that seem to be big issues in the way that if a political candidate, for example, was committing a crime or committing adultery, something of that nature, which would really strike home for them and bother them. These financial matters, I just think most people say, well, in my own life, finances are tough, and it certainly isn't something that either they fully understand or something that they think is in itself a disqualifying demerit. Robert
Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. Enjoy it tonight, Robert. Get you a nice, get a cup of coffee or whatever, and sit back and enjoy it. I guess that's all we can do.
Absolutely, Dave. I certainly have my suspicions we'll be burning the midnight oil.
Wouldn't be Election Day if we weren't. Robert, appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, no problem. Always good to be on, Dave. Have a great day.
You as well. 304-TALK, 304 is the text line, 800-765-8255, 800-765-TALK. Rest of the show is yours. Consider it an anything-goes election day.